When we talked about Naperville School District 203 and its mealy-mouthed identitarian superintendent, Dan Bridges, I said, I'll take Dan Bridges at his word in this respect. He wants to begin a dialogue. Okay, sure. Let's begin the dialogue. I'll tell you what. You present your case, and let's get a few parents together, and we'll fly Bob Woodson in from D.C. or Shelby Steele in from the West Coast, and we'll let them respond. So you can tell two gentlemen who were involved in the civil rights movement in the 1960s and have spent their lives in the pursuit intellectually and practically of uplifting people of all races. You can tell them what time it is in the black community. Dan Bridges in Naperville. Here's his statement of first principles for Naperville 203, one of the loveliest suburbs in the country to live in, so some of the surveys say. That'll change.
Good afternoon. I'm back with another installment of 203 and 203. Today I'm addressing some concerns we have heard with community reaction to our recent countywide Equity Institute training. Naperville 203 has publicly committed to creating a diverse and inclusive environment for our students and staff. We've done this with the hiring of an executive director of diversity and inclusion, drafting of a comprehensive equity plan and the corresponding work, and ultimately through a Board of Education resolution reaffirming District 203's commitment to equity for all students, overcoming systemic racism, and ending racial injustice. Despite Naperville 203's overall high academic achievement patterns, we are aware of persistent racial, ethnic, and economic-related disparities and inequities in our students' learning and comprehensive school experiences.
By the way, Naperville 203 is 90% plus white and Asian, with 3/4 of the schools, the school's kids, all the schools, grade schools and high schools, because it's a unit district, 3/4 are white. Less than 5% black, about 5% Latino. But Dan Bridges is going to let the racial healing begin. For more on this, pleased to be joined again by our friend, Bob Woodson, founder and president of the Woodson Center, also founder of the 1776 Unites Project, and author of Lessons from the Least of These, the Woodson Principles. Bob, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Pleased to be here again, Dan. Pleased to be here.
So you heard Dan Bridges, as a representative of so many school superintendents around the country, his first principle when it comes to race and equity, the favorite word in K through 12 education. What's the Woodson principled response to that?
First of all, it's insulting. As I said, I would prefer the old-fashioned bigotry than the bigotry of low expectations and diminished standards as a way of pandering to blacks. It is most insulting to lower the bar, to assume that any time to achieve fairness and justice, that the bar must be lowered in order for blacks to achieve. This is really hostile to the interest of the. Dan, nothing is more lethal than low expectations or giving people a convenient reason to fail. And so I just think this is going to set things back. We were better off under segregation in many ways. We've documented the fact that there were 5 major black high schools operating in major cities throughout the country, and they were operating at 50 to a classroom, used textbooks, half the budget of white schools, and every one of those black high schools out-tested every white school in those cities. So if blacks were able to achieve not just equity, but superiority in the presence of those oppressive conditions back in under segregation, the question is, why the low performance today? Mm-hmm. See, these are the troubling questions that the left doesn't want to raise.
Well, they have an answer, right? They have an answer, and the answer is white supremacy and systematic racism.
Well, the problem is under de jure in the 1920s and 1930s, there was de jure segregation, and racism was enshrined in law. and we were operating with used textbooks and half the budget, and yet we achieved under those circumstances beyond what we're able to do now. In many of the urban centers, blacks are running those systems that they are alleging is confronting systemic racism. The question I ask, how does systemic racism work when the superintendent of schools in most urban centers are black, the principals, the school boards, everybody? How does systemic racism work? You know, how did you white folks come up with this system that you can operate through remote control or something?
Well,
I got to find that remote control device that you all have gotten. That's the answer. We need to get to it. Dad, you need to tell us
where I'm hiding the remote control.
Yeah. How does that remote racism rate control work?
Well, you know what they say, Bob, right? So then the response to that, and there was an op-ed from a New York Times contributor, whiteness is the real pandemic, just the other day. And the system as it was in 1850 is still impactful in 2021. In other words, these are institutions that have a legacy of white supremacy that needs to be expunged. And so that's how you can have black people in charge of schools, in charge of cities and so forth. But the legacy of white supremacy hampers them from achieving real equity. And that's why we need things like reparations that we're now seeing afoot. Evanston, Illinois, home of Northwestern University, the first city in the country to set up a $10 million reparations fund, $25,000 housing grants for black residents of Evanston.
I know. I'm getting in touch with a real estate office since I can't get me a condominium in Evanston. I'll tell you that right now.
Not until, Bob, let me just give you some real estate. Only if the reparations indemnify you from the property taxes. Because the property taxes are going to eat right away at your home value and that $25,000 grant. You got to get clear on those property taxes.
Well, property taxes are racist. We know that.
Exactly. Right.
And it's coming to Chicago too. Our city council here, they're considering reparations and.
But right.
But let's talk about that. I mean,
but the argument that they make, reparations is an expression of it, is everything is the legacy of how things used to be.
And that's just patently untrue. In our studies of 1776, we've commissioned 23 scholars to go back and look at history and look at the proof of that. In 1930s and 1940s, blacks outperformed whites. Our labor participation rate in the 20s and 30s was higher than whites. And also, the reality is, I don't want to be compared with whites. I mean, if you look at the national scorecard, whites are only the students are only 40% are performing at. I want to be compared with Asians and Black Nigerians. You see, these are the ones who are high performers in terms of education, in terms of family. I mean, income. So this whole issue about parity and all concentrates on externals and ignores the reality that when whites were at their worst, blacks were at their best. We documented the fact that even in Chicago in the Brownsville section, there were 731 black-owned businesses, $100 million in real estate assets owned in the city of Chicago in 1929. How did we achieve that then? And you have these rundown neighborhoods today.
Well, then what happened?
What happened is that the government in the 1960s did with their urban renewals and also poverty programs did more to undermine the moral and spiritual and cultural fabric of the black community with its welfare system. It separated work from income and thus making fathers redundant, and millions flooded into the welfare system. The nuclear family was debunked as being Eurocentric and therefore racist. So you have these cultural factors, plus the government opened offices that actively recruited blacks into the welfare system, and millions flooded in the 70s at a time when the unemployment rate in New York for black men was under 4%. So what government policy did in the 60s was more injurious to the interests of blacks than anything that happened after slavery up until the 60s.
I think I have an idea on what the response will be, but just develop it a little bit more. You know, that your position. I'd rather deal with an honest bigot than these sort of do-gooding, Chardonnay Antifa types in the suburbs. St. Anselm College physics professor Ian Durham, University of Bristol math professor Caroline Weisner, and a journalist are calling for doing away with the physics term quantum supremacy because even though it has nothing to do with white supremacy, it has to do with computers outperforming, quantum computers outperforming traditional computers. It's uncomfortably reminiscent of white supremacy, according to these academics and journalists.
Well, I have to quote my friend and colleague Jason Riley, Wall Street Journal, and it was a plea. And as guilty white people, stop helping us.
Yeah.
Just stop helping us. It is so crippling to look at every sinew of information, scintilla of information, and looking at it through a racial prism. Where does it end? And if you look at polls, what do the black community think about this? 60% of them polled when asked whether racial discrimination is a principal barrier to your progress, they answered no. 82% of blacks polled said they are against defund the police. And so where is this great demand for these kind of changes and reforms and reparations? Where's the great demand on the part of the black community? Why are these black liberals presuming to speak for what is in the best interest of the black community? And this black caucus and civil rights people are just sitting back in silence. There's a conspiracy of silence where they're not speaking out against this outrage, this insult. Black Americans are being treated like an exotic pet. Be careful how you talk around these people. You can't hurt their feelings. We must dumb down standards if we are to achieve equity for blacks. This is insulting.
And the other thing that's happened too with identitarianism is you're no longer alone. You're not the sole focus. Black people, black Americans, not the sole focus because everybody recognizes that hustle and says, well, let's do it for indigenous people. Let's do it for Asian people. Let's do it for Latinx people. Let's do it for the LGBTIAQ onomatopoeia community. And so, you literally at Columbia University have 6 different graduation ceremonies for people based on identitarian characteristics. You have a Native American, Asian, Latinx, Black students, one for FLI people, that's first generation or low income, and a lavender graduation for the LGBT plus community. 6 different graduations at an Ivy League school, graduation ceremonies at an Ivy League school.
And anytime you generalize about a group along racial ethnic line, and then you will try to apply remedies, it always benefits those elites at one end at the expense of those at the bottom. For example, Coca-Cola now is saying, in response to systemic racism, it's going to require all of the law firms that deal with the company to have 30% black lawyers. Well, what the hell does that have to do with some black woman in public housing struggling to raise her children? It means that upper income elite blacks who already are making great incomes will be more enriched as a consequence. And if you go to group by group and look at what remedies are being proposed, it always helps those at the top at the expense of those at the bottom. That's why I left the civil rights movement, because I led a demonstration outside of a Wyatt Laboratories, and when they desegregated, they hired 9 black PhD chemists who said, when asked to join our movement, they said, we got these jobs because we were qualified, not because of what you did. I left the movement because I realized there was a huge bait and switch going on, and it's still going on today, where you use the demographics of those at the bottom to demand remedies that only benefit those at the top. And that process is continuing on today. These race grievance trainers are making millions of dollars off of the misery of their people and at the expense of this country. And this is a racial hustle.
What would you tell people in the suburbs of places like Naperville School District 203 who don't agree with the superintendent, who aren't on board for the racial hustle but are afraid? They don't want to be called a racist. They don't want their children to suffer academic consequences or social consequences by pushing back against this orthodoxy that is being imposed. What would you tell those people?
Tell them we are the Woodson Center 1776 Unites. We are publishing curriculum, and we can provide assistance to them to give them the ammunition that they need to push back. But they need to develop some some courage to push back. But the Woodson Center 1776 Unites. We are poised to provide assistance to them. Beth Feely, who you know is our senior advisor and a mom who's facing these same challenges. And Beth is really heading up our efforts and pushing out our curriculum. And so if your listeners want to know more about what they can do and they want information so they can be armed to confront these outrages, they should be in touch with us.
All right. Bob Woodson, founder, president of the Woodson Center, as you just heard, 1776 Unites. He's also the author of Lessons from the Least of These, the Woodson Principles. Bob, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. Good talking to you.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer.
Your show keeps me alive during the week. There's nobody I'd rather listen to between 5 and 9 in the morning than you guys.
On AM 560, The Answer.
Balance of Nature's fruits and vegetables in a capsule. Changing the world, one life at a time.
I bust my butt 16, 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, and I needed to do something. Wasn't sure what. Did a lot of research, and most health products pass through our digestive system with very little, if any, benefit. But I have your 2 bottles of Balance of Nature, the fruits and the veggies, and it's time that people discover this product because it is real, and I see noticeable results. I'm taking Balance of Nature, and I'm getting healthy. I'm reaching a new balance in health. So let's get the word out. Let's get you guys out there and running.
Right now, Balance of Nature is offering free shipping and 35% off on any new preferred order. Call 1-800-2468-751 or go to balanceofnature.com and use discount code Chicago.
This is attorney Stephen Leahy. This is